So like keen to understand where so your initial wedge was like lease accounting, right?
Yes.
In
Yeah.
industry, and then now you have like a full audit platform. Like where did that was that part of the plan, or like did you land there from like your previous job history? Yeah, how did that work?
And a little bit of both. Um, and I think you'll find that an entrepreneur after a few years can say it was part of the plan and it was also not part of the plan at the same time, right? So, I started in finance, so I understood from the corporate side, GAAP, IFRS, SOX, audit readiness. We did an IPO when I worked for a company. And so that was RevRec and leases, these new accounting standards, which would be reading a document and then building a little spreadsheet to put it into the ERP. And through that experience, as a naive 25-year-old, I read all these contracts, built my spreadsheet, put it into SAP. But then when KPMG came in, they pulled some file out of SAP with 10,000, entries, and then asked for 10 of my lines and maybe two or three of my contracts, right? All my precious work. And then I found out we paid them to do that, right? And so in starting Trulion, first of all, it was like if I could go A to Z in these new workflows like leases, like revenue, then I could go from the source document to the journal entry. And if I could go A to Z, then I would like to invite KPMG into my platform to go Z to A, right? To
Hmm.
go from the journal entry back to the source document. And when I sat there in 2019, that was not achievable, but there was this early, technology called AI, right? It was the early NLP, entity recognition models.
Hmm.
And so that's really what enabled that workflow. So we started in leases, but also sold concurrently to auditors. So since Trulion's founding in 2019, we've had two end clients. One is the the corporate controller, chief financial officer, and one is
Hmm.
the audit firm. And they both worked on our lease accounting platform, but from different angles. Same product.
Got you. Okay, so it was like one product that they both came into. How did you think about like focus for the team and from like a go-to-market perspective? Like was that confusing? Was that distracting?
Yeah, it's really hard to have two go-to-markets as a subscale company. It's still hard, right? And we're at various stages of scale. So, well, first of all, we made a decision to focus on leases because there was a regulatory tailwind. So that made customer acquisition costs are very, very high when you're selling to the corporate controller, especially nowadays with all the competition of ERPs and close management tools. So because there was a regulatory change, that helped improve kind of our tailwind to acquire these customers. So that helped. And then the auditors had the same urgency. So that allowed us to launch both these products in a couple of years. Um, I think the harder focus right now is the fact that we've expanded beyond leases for the CFO, but we've also expanded beyond lease audit for the auditors. And so that becomes a multi-dimensional problem because when you unlock the Trulion platform and you're an auditor, our fastest growing business line today is not selling leases to auditors. In fact, they were like, Isaac, I don't actually want to audit. I don't want to reperform this whole thing. I want to take your AI, I want to take your workflow, I want to mesh them together, and I would templatize that for revenue testing, equity testing, employee benefit testing, right?
Hmm.
Pension, just keep going down the line, revenue existence testing. That's the hard part is it's not just two go-to-markets, but each go-to-market now has new templates of what they want to do with the tool.
Yeah, do you think of it as like you're building two companies in parallel now? Like, is it that scale?
Um, it's like building two companies in parallel. Now, when you start, you realize you're building two companies. There's different ways to operate. But in reality, what we're going to do is we're going to look back in retrospect at this era where we're a vertical AI company, just to be clear.
Mhm. Yeah.
The LLMs are horizontal, and we've gone deep into one area like accounting, right? And in order to go deep into one area at a time where you have LLMs, you have incumbents trying to maintain their share, you have to do a lot of things well at the same time. So you essentially have to run two, three, four bona fide workflows in parallel, right? And so those could be workflows or companies, however you want to figure it out. But my
Yeah, yeah.
responsibility is to build one company, not two.
Yeah, yeah. So do you think like is that like an edge for you? Like is having that other side an edge, or is it like is it actually creating like problems? Like I can imagine in the future, like let's say like everyone's auditing and they've all got their own Trulies, like are there like independence questions that will come into that of like, oh, we're auditing on here, but then it's also doing a lot of that like client side workflow? Or do you see it as like a pro, right? Like an opportunity?
It's definitely an opportunity. Look, if you can do it from a business perspective, like we've been able to do it, right? And so from a business perspective, the lease accounting business creates a little bit of free cash flow, right?
Hmm.
So you have EBITDA, and you can explain to your founder friends what EBITDA is, but it ends up being a net positive thing, right? When you're running a business. So we're happy with the cash flow. Additionally, we wouldn't be here in audit if we didn't have the leases. Because we created an end-to-end workflow, it takes 1, 2, 3 years with firms to build up credibility. No matter how cool your LLM wrapper is, like it takes time, it takes people, and they really have to throw it against the wall. So number one, there's incremental cash flow. Number two, it was our it was our chip to gain credibility. Now, your question about like how the future holds and some independence issues. Um, Sam, like the market is bigger than us. Someone once described them as the accounting gods. When IFRS or FASB creates a new rule, my friends in accounting say, "Oh, the accounting gods decided, to change things last week." And I think the accounting gods over the next 3 or 4 years will decide what the future of a credible audit is, right? Is it a two-sided mechanism where we're still on our side, we both have those tools, and we're kind of going at each other, right? Or is it a single box that captures really, I would say, a lot of the source data and unstructured data, which ends up being the last mile of an audit? Is it a single
Hmm.
box that captures all that source data, and it's the accounting team's responsibility to put it in that box, and it's the audit firm's responsibility to wade through that box with their methodology? And we don't know that answer, but I would say Trulion is ready for both.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's unique, right? You're set up for probably whichever direction that goes. Whereas others could get like caught. Like if we decide to like everyone plays in the same sandpit, then like there could be other sandpits which get lonely, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
Where are you guys playing? You're in the non-audited companies or the lower threshold, correct?
Yeah, yeah. So in the UK, there's a couple of SME thresholds which like exempt people across like balance sheet size, turnover, and employee count, which exempt companies from audits. Where we would sit below that. Um, it'd be quite rare for like bookkeeping to be done through briefcase, and then for that to be audited. But even then, the audit would happen plugged into zero. So like where we're not the GL for those limited companies right now, the audit would happen through zero and the auditors wouldn't even probably know about briefcase.
Interesting. So I think the way this goes, um, let's talk about audit for a second, because you came from Deloitte, correct? Big Four. Right. And so I think the way this goes is there's probably two classes of audits. That's the way this thing goes. Because if I'm talking to you and my friend last week who was at KPMG, spent 5, 6 years in audit and in technology. One of Trulion's I would say best products is our it's called data match. It's a
Hmm.
substantive testing, right? Evidence matching module. And we build it bottoms up. What does that mean? Like we didn't point the LLM and everything. We actually built it in a way where the evidence is matched with the sample. The agent does the matching, it provides the tag, it links you to the source data. That's because everyone was on Excel or Excel plugin tools, and they ultimately need that evidence as a preparer to give to the manager and to file a work paper. So we built that bottoms up. Now, your cohort who are coming into audit and very kind of AI and LLM native, they're looking at that. They're saying like an LLM could do that. And they're right. To some extent, an LLM could do that. And it's an interesting debate because in aggregate, the LLM has flaws. In addition to context and hallucination, it's technically guessing, it's probabilistic, but also there's no evidence of the logic of the chain of events. Like it's just a black box. And so, we can point an agent at our audit and run a similar task, but every time we go through the comparison of our data match versus a pure LLM, we're stronger and we can get you to the kind of the fail safe if something's wrong. And I just it's interesting because the work is so tedious that it makes your average junior auditor just go straight to the LLM and just like evident, automate this matching for me and I'll do the rest. But in reality, I think it'll just move to two classes of audit, right? For public companies and large companies, they'll need a Trulion type audit where it's powered by AI, but everything is matched within the methodology. You can pass a PCOB audit, right? But I think for some of the smaller companies that need an audit, right, or some semblance of an audit, there are going to be firms that can do an LLM based audit, right? The materiality is lower. We have a greater risk tolerance in the same way you do like an automated SOC audit or something like that. So I do think eventually this is going to have to bifurcate into what types of audits you're getting.
How do you think about it from like a junior training perspective? So, like, did you get questions from firms when they come to you and they say like, right, so what are our juniors going to be doing? How does it work for them using Trulion? How are they going to learn? Who are going to be the signing partners in the future? Like, is that something you worry about, or is that for the firms to deal with?
I mean, I worry about it on a personal level, but at a Trulion level, our goal is to provide end value for the client. The client is the company. So Deloitte or EY are the end clients. And if Deloitte or EY want to decrease the cost and improve the accuracy of the audit, I don't care if, sorry, it's not that I don't care. It matters less to me whether they're automating a partner's job or a junior's job, right? I'm trying to deliver them, an automated experience. Now, philosophically, there is an issue for the junior auditor, right? Because if you're automating the prepare work, as you call it,
Hmm. Yeah.
then there's no training ground for preparation. Now, I would just put that responsibility back onto the audit firm, and I would even get creative, and I would actually make people do like blue pencil or red pencil based manual audits to train. Like
Do
I
you
would put them
think?
in yeah, put them in the financial statement for a few months and have them do a manual audit. If you do it's like learning an instrument, right? Like you're trying
Mhm.
to teach them an instrument. They need to every time I've talked to someone who's been through that experience, they learn the tying of the balance sheet and the income statement. It's almost like accounting is an art. And they
Mhm.
learn that through the physical interaction of a pencil and a financial statement, right? So start them on the bare bones, like learning an instrument, right? And then I would say make a harder pivot towards technology, right? Make a harder pivot towards, okay, now that you've trained there, and maybe there's an intermediary step where they're doing exception handling or kind of investigations, but then you point them towards the technology, right? But I think that's the way it goes, right? We still got to teach people handwriting and cursive and all these things.
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. When we studied, we would do like T accounts to do like learn the debits and credits manually. Um, yeah, and I guess yeah, that was pretty formative, I guess. So I think it's interesting to see how it plays out. Isaac, so keen to understand what you feel about like Trulion as a company. Like, are you guys an AI native company? Like, you started 2019. Like, do we talk about AI back then? Like, I know attention was all you need was 2017. Like, was that on your mind? Like, was kind of the fact that we had these transformer models coming, like in your awareness? And then, like, how's that shifted now? Like, have you seen it as like a reinvention of Trulion, or is it more just been like a natural progression?
It's been a natural progression. Um, let's see. So, first of all, in 2019, I felt that AI would be a service handled by the hyperscalers. So I had
Mhm.
just witnessed the cloud revolution where, and again, when I started my career, it was DBs and DBAs, right? And so cloud crystallized into Amazon, Microsoft, and Google. And I was fascinated with how easy it was with AWS to spin out an S3 bucket and get all the tools, including Comprehend, which was one of the early entity recognition services for AWS. So so in 2019, and I was in New York, a lot of the companies were building their own language models. They were hiring data scientists, they were taking venture capital and hiring data scientists, especially in the legal and accounting spaces. That's what they were doing. That's what BotKeeper was doing, right? I don't know exactly what they were doing, but there was money put. Now I said, I'm not going to pay a dollar for a data scientist. I'm going to ride this wave of off the shelf AI tools and I'm going to embed it into the workflow, and I'm going to focus on full stack engineers to build the rules engines, right? I felt like the rules engine was still a defensible proprietary area to play. So
Mhm.
AI from the early days was embedded into the lease accounting workflow. We were writing the improvements in OCR, NLP, and AI, and we were making marginal decisions around things like pre-processing, post-processing. We have our own algorithms, and so we were kind of riding that wave, but on the edges of the LLMs. And then when ChatGPT came out in end of 2022, I think it was 22. Does that
Yeah,
sound right?
yeah, November 22. Yeah,
End of
GPT-4 was March
2022.
23.
That was great for us because we were already working with OpenAI and the LLMs, but the demand increased because people, kind of came, well, what are the AI solutions? ChatGPT's for my mom and Trullion's for my accountant. And so that really helped us. And so that pushed us more into where else could we use LLMs, not just in accounting, but across the tools. So we are obviously very early adopters of Cursor, both internally and different ways to use LLMs internally and across our tool. So I would call that, I would call the first era kind of the embedded AI era. The second era was really around LLM proliferation and how you could use it across the tools. Again, still maintaining the thesis that LLMs should be kind of a raw energy into your tool, not something that you try to build or compete with. And I think that the third era, which we're in right now, is agentic. And so after ChatGPT, we said, oh, well, we're going to invest in our own agentic framework, right? And not just like a chatbot, which we had for support already, but something that had an orchestration engine, a planning engine, an execution engine, and could use our tools like our rules engines or off the shelf tools in the same way. And so that is the long answer of the AI journey of Trulion. It has all been kind of empowered by LLMs, and I think we're in a different era now. I think we're in a completely different era. I think this has come way faster than anyone expected. We could talk about that, but this is almost like a era four for me in just 6 years.
Yep, 100%. So if I'm an auditor or if I'm in a CFO's team and I've got Claude Enterprise, can I now control my Truly through Claude Enterprise? Do you have a Trulion MCP? If not, why not? Are we going to replace like interacting with actual software? Yeah, how's this all going to play out?
Um, it could. You have to be future ready, right? And so if you're building a software company right now, and hopefully in the past few years, you've built agents and workflows, right? Agents and workflows. It's as simple as that. And today, if you're a customer of Trulion, you could use our agent, Truly, and you could ask questions on your data. You could create prompt checklists and templates and disclosure checklists. And if you're even daring enough, you can act upon your data, right? Update this contract with Truly. That's in earlier stages.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
but fundamentally, the agent and the workflow are decoupled. The workflow, the Trulion workflow, is enabled with things like MCP or modern protocol, and the Truly agent is basically can read MCP and can read protocols. So what does that mean? It means that if you're a Claude user and you want a bona fide, GAAP or IFRS workflow, a rules engine that's been tested in now 3,500 audited companies around the world, in theory, you could use the Trulion workflow. Now we're not plugged into Claude yet. Claude Enterprise and Cowork, I would say, is more of a SMB kind of mid-market application. There's tons of applications, but as it relates to like auditable accounting, it's more in that area. But yeah, we're both headless and grounded at the same time to be able to work with an agentic world in the future.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Like one thing that I would ask anyone auditing today or anyone building for auditors is why can't me and Claude Cowork audit a Fortune 500 company? Like, why can't I do that right now? And like, if not, what's stopping us? Like, the ledger's there, the data's there. I've got probably an audit file, which is basically just a load of buckets to put files. Why can't I do it right now? Yeah, and I'm curious. Like, I guess the follow-on question to that is like, what are the moats right now for you guys? Like, is it still rule-based software, or can I like generate that immediately? Is it way more complicated having built that yourself than like a UI, right? All the stuff behind it, and then you said there like we've had 3,000 audited companies go through it. So are you talking there that it's like credibility, or is it that you've seen the examples and trained on them, or you have like evaluations? What are the like what are the defensibility pieces here?
Yeah. Okay. So these are all good questions. And look, let's be real. For every software company right now, moats are very thin. They just are. They're thin, and it's forcing everyone to step up their game, right? Not just in the software, but in the brand and the customer service and all of that. I think the biggest threat to Trulion and all of us is Claude Code. I think that is the power of LLMs right now, is the fact that coding is getting so much more powerful. So if you understand the workflow that's needed, you can recreate that software in less time than ever. It's still hard. We all know it generates code, but it doesn't make it work, right? But whereas a few years ago, you know, 10% of our code was generated by AI, and now it's 30% or whatever it is. That number is just continue to rise. Okay, so that's the number one risk to our business mode, is the ability to replicate through good engineering and good LLMs. The defensibility we have are as follows. Number one, our AI is better. It is incrementally better. We constantly benchmark and eval against Claude, against OpenAI, against Gemini, and it is better, right? So, for
Keen
example,
to
yeah,
push
go
you
ahead.
on that, Isaac. So like is that are you, and without giving away like secret source here, like is that at the inference like brain level? Like, have you like fine-tuned these models, or is it at like a tooling, scaffolding? You're like taking similar models, but within the Trulion environment, they're much more capable. Like, how is it
But
better?
both. I'll take an easier one. Okay, financial statements. Right. We've run uh, in the past 12 months 50,000 financial statements through our platform. I'm not saying we have. I'm saying our clients have in a secure environment.
Yeah.
They're doing their audits. I don't know what those look like. But I know that they're using our mathematical accuracy, internal consistency, version comparison, all different algorithms on that, and constantly validating and improving those algorithms over time. Claude has not reached that critical mass. In fact, you can't put a financial statement in Claude because of the depth of it, right? The heaviness of it, right? So we are taking these documents in, we're persisting them and indexing them in our database, and we're laser focused on our own models, our own incremental areas within that example. And there's a whole library of these in Trulion. Okay, so that's number one. Whereas even if we do like math accuracy, which is a popular one that anyone can relate to, you might get, I don't know, 70 to 80% benchmarks in Claude and OpenAI right now, which is up 6 to 8% in the past few releases. And we're at like 94, 95%, right? So there's a delta there in terms of the accuracy. Um, so that's one. So AI native advantages from the flywheel of our data and a focus on specific areas within accounting. I would say two, we do have a lot of proprietary integration points with incumbent systems. So, I understand, look, Cowork is very good and has new integrations and endpoints and stuff like that. But like when you're doing an audit and you have Trulion on one side and an engagement system on the other side, so a system of record and a system of action, we're mirroring your entire engagement structure inside Trulion, right? So that the nature of our industry says that Deloitte or EY needs to be able to have all 1,000 of those engagements with everything that was collected, and that needs to be mimicked in Trulion, right? And
Mhm.
so every work paper needs to go from the system of engagement to Trulion. It needs to be done and sent right back in a specified format. Okay. Claude might do that tomorrow, but for now, that's just not their focus. Okay. So number one, AI. Number two, integrations. And then a third, there's a few more, but I'll give you a curveball here. Okay. Our, our our AI business model is stronger than an LLM pointing at an accounting task or an LLM wrapper and pointing an accounting task. What does that mean? You don't need LLMs for every accounting task. You need it for some contracts. It's great, right? But you also need business logic. You also need algorithms and small language models. You also just need CLI and basic code, right? And the art is putting those all together in a framework. And so I'll give you like a silly example. If you want to read a financial statement, um, and you want to know what's in that, people are pointing like Claude 4.6 at that or some frontier model in OpenAI that's costing 1 million tokens. And there's, this crazy context. They might get you the answer, right? But we'll break that apart. We'll say the table's easy. We've got something there. That text, put it on Gemini 2.5, right? And figure out where the comma is, right? And come back. And so at each point, you look at our operating margins as a business, we're at 80 to 85%. So LLMs and LLM native businesses, there's going to be a cost take, right? Right now it's on compute. It's all subsidized. We have no idea what inference costs. We have no idea if there's going to be a run on inference. We have no idea if we're going to need data centers on Mars, and SpaceX is going to be the next. We just have no idea. And so we've built, the software in a way where it's taking the most operationally efficient tool at every moment and operating. And it also doesn't make us vulnerable to any run on inference or, kind of LLM apocalyptic scenario. So that's something that I'm proud of.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I've never heard that argument of like what you're saying is that you can basically run a business better than the hyperscalers, and largely that's through like specialization.
Correct. Now, there's a counter argument, which is I would call that the Sam Altman acolyte strategy. So if you have access to OpenAI or what's his name in Anthropic, Dario, okay? If that's your uncle or your friend and he's going to give you a subsidized token license or put a few OpenAI members on your board or whatever, that's a that's a good hack. That's pretty good, right? Like getting cheap LLMs right now is a huge advantage. So it doesn't matter if that query just costs you, a query can cost you $10,000 in accounting, right? It doesn't matter. You could train long horizon agents and just kind of F around as long as you want if you do have subsidized access to tokens. Um, I don't have those. I'm not related to Sam Altman. So we got to fight.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Isaac, keen to get into your role. So you were the founder of Trulion, the CEO, and then now you're the president and chairman. Talk me through that transition. What does your day-to-day look like now versus what it did? Yeah.
Yeah. So founder, president, and chairman. As president, I oversee product and R&D, which is about half of our 100-person company. I have a partner who's our CEO named Artie Minson, who oversees sales and marketing and G&A, right? So finance and HR. My day to day is focused on the product, but also as a member of the management team, excuse me, spending a lot of time with our top customers, our top partners, and just general hands-on business operations. The company was founded in 2019, so I was CEO from 2019 to the end of 2025. In the summer of 2025, as we were scaling, when I say scaling, running two business lines, we're now international, so we have a small office in London, but also supporting like global standards. Um, and our senior leadership team on the go-to-market side is in New York. So
Mhm.
I was going back and forth on international flights every other week, red eyes from Tel Aviv to New York. At some point in the summer, I confided in our board member and one of my first investors, Artie Minson. Now, Artie um, was an auditor at Ernst& Young. He then became the CFO of AOL Time Warner, and then ended up being actually CEO of WeWork and another software company. And he had been on our board and early investor. And I confided in Artie. I said, Artie, this is big, too big for me, all this people management. Would you be interested in helping? And so that conversation naturally evolved into a partnership. I put CEO on the table, and I think that it's been a really good decision for the company. I think it's been a good decision for me personally. And if founders are listening, I would say founders probably, what I've learned is we probably overrate our kind of title and kind of honor, so to speak, and underrate our influence and underappreciate influence. That's the most important thing. So it's been a great partnership, and I'm president.
Yeah, yeah. So wait, what do you mean by that? Underrating your influence?
I'm saying, like you're by getting the title of CEO. I think that's hard for a lot of people, right? It wasn't for me, but I can understand how it could be hard for some people. But in reality, what I think gets you excited and proud as an entrepreneur is not the title, right? It's the influence. I want to have influence. I want to have impact. I want people to believe in me and appreciate me, um, and that's the most important. And so, like, I can't say that it's perfect, but I am still able to feel the feelings I've felt. In fact, I've had a load off my back because the responsibilities of managing a global leadership team, especially on the go-to-market side, is not what brought me the excitement and the joy, and it certainly didn't take the company to the next level. So it's really the impact and the influence that is the most important, not the title.
Got you, got you. So where are you going now? Like, are you guys? I know you raised an A extension, which I think was about the same amount as your initial A. Like, are you growing quickly? Like, are you going to raise again to like manage that demand? Like, or are you guys? You mentioned your EBITDA. Like, where are you now?
Right. So we didn't raise an A extension. We raised an A, and then quickly after the A, there was a B, right?
Oh,
And
sorry. Okay.
the B was open for more, and so we called that additional capital. It was like kind of a small B. And so right now we are well capitalized. At the same time, we've re-accelerated because of AI. So we have two natural options as a company right now. We can, you know, get to profitability, or we can raise another equity round. And in terms of what I want to do, I want to do what the best thing for the business and the industry is. I think that if you asked me a few months ago, I might have leaned more into profitability, but I actually think that there's just been some crazy raises lately, especially as we focus a lot on accounting and audit firms, and all of a sudden there's been some, I would say, overcapitalized companies in the space. And so there's certainly both sides, like profitability versus like more of a fortress balance sheet, winner takes all, agentic move. So we have both on the table, and I think by the end of 2026 you'll see what we choose.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So if you had like 100 million to like, what I don't get is like with these big raises, like what, like, is it boots on the ground? Like, or is it like if you don't have those friends at OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, go find them and get deals for the tokens? Like, yeah, what
Yeah,
would you
I
do?
don't know. Look, I think first of all it's nuanced, meaning if you're a Series B, Series C company and you raise 80, you probably only need 40, but you still need capital. Like that rule still applies, that capital in a growing company can accelerate distribution and R&D and everything. So what's happening? I think first of all, just that there's a general quirk in the market where funds need to deploy more capital, right? They just raised a lot in the past few cycles, and so there's generally bigger rounds. Um, and 100 million might look smaller than it did. I mean, it might look, yeah, smaller than it did a few years ago. So there's a few quirks in the market. Um, Look, I think there's probably two ways they're putting the capital to work, in addition to just hiring good sales and marketing, good R&Ds. I think money is earmarked towards tokens. I think it is, right? I mean, if Anthropic is spending 90 cents of every dollar on inference in that area, then it's just going to trickle down to the acolytes. The other thing is, I think people are rallying around the forward deployed engineer model. So they're saying, hey, there's kind of this little, talk of like, the next AI software company is a services company, masked as a software, whatever that means. There's certainly this like, okay, I've got to penetrate AI to the lawyers or to the accountants. Well, in order to do that, I've got to hire art engineers, but I've also got to hire lawyers. Well, wait a minute, lawyers are expensive. They're really expensive, right? They're not coming down like an engineer to go for the gold. They're expensive. And so I think these companies are hiring a bunch of lawyers and accountants and calling them kind of like forward deployed engineers, and that's expensive.
Do you think about like how do you think about accounting expertise? Do you hire accountants? Are you doing forward deployed work? Are you going and sitting down? I heard Lagora spent their first 6 months in like the basement of a law firm and just like built directly with all the lawyers. They would go around at lunchtime with their laptop and just like show it to all of them. Like how do you think about how do you think about accounting and auditing expertise for you guys at Trulion?
Well, I could have it wrong, I'll tell you that, because Lagora and Harvey in particular have raised a fantastic amount of money. I don't know what the revenue is, but certainly I applaud, their ability to attract capital and talent and all those things. We have a lot of accountants. We have, a couple dozen CPAs, most of them ex Big Four. both on the advisory, audit, and controllership side. In retrospect, we've had a forward deployed model for 6 years, right? Like, when I started the company, it was just me, two engineers, and then the first hire I had was a CPA. He was at Deloitte, and then he was a controller, and we did sales, CS, product, everything together, right? So that's always been part of the DNA. All of our rules engines are checked by accountants who are constantly running tests of our software through their Excel models, which is kind of hilarious. But the thing I think we've done differently than a Harvey or Lagore, and I even see some of these AI native accounting firms, is they have sat with one firm very, very closely for a long time, like this 6 months in the basement. We never did that. We have a couple customers that are like our anchor customers, right? Top, you know, 20, 10 firms that are heavily influential on the roadmap, but we've always built it in a community roadmap style because that's how I took it. So, we're much more distributed. We're not trying to like look over Susie's shoulder and say, what do you do all day, right? Or, speak into this recorder for me. Um, we're a little bit more in like a classic SaaS community model where you're trying to find the cohort of interesting features and functionality for the market, right? Yeah. And so we'll see how it
Yeah,
plays out.
yeah, and I do wonder whether there's opportunity for like these vertical AI companies are going to have to, because the models are so powerful, like there's so much scope now compared to like what traditional SaaS could do is like, oh, we'll help you book meetings. Now it's like, we'll help you do all of your work. So I do
Yeah.
wonder whether there is scope to go and like go a bit deeper there. And
What do you
then
what do
you
you
just
mean?
need, so like to understand not just like what they're doing today and how you can build software for them, understand why does that function exist? Should it exist in an AI native world? And if we could rebuild it from scratch, how would we rebuild it? How would we structure labor around it? And I think that level of insight potentially only comes from like a depth of understanding, whether you've worked deeply in that place or like a co-partnering, co-building with someone existing and forward thinking. Yeah.
Look, I think that's accurate, and I definitely think that's like the fresh way to look at things. Um, I we work in a regulated industry. Excuse me, like audit exists. The audit itself is the human checking the work, right? And the human deriving the methodology. And um, look, if you want to rethink the audit, you could rethink it whatever way you want, but there's a cycle to these things. Like I'm also, Trulion, it's like truth, like we're grounded in truth. And the truth of the matter is, it is regulated. It's regulated for a reason. It might not be sexy if you're an incoming auditor, but like I could rethink the audit right now, but it wouldn't be good for our customers, right? There's a lot of industries like this, uh, but I yeah, if I rethink the audit, it would just be an intellectual exercise. Now, CAS and bookkeeping, that's different, right? Because you're providing a an operational value for an end client. Client just wants to sell more lemonade, right? So you could help them. You could really help them and enjoy their experience. For audit, it's a little bit different. But yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah. Isaac, keen to get into like a bit about like your motivations, especially on like the nature nurture side of things. I think you did like a card flipping business when you were 12. That's very like entrepreneurial, right? Like, do you think that like this is like some innate quality, or is it something that like you actually learned and cultivated over time before you founded Trulion?
I don't know the answer. I could just speak to my experience. So first of all, we're talking about basketball card flipping, right? So not car flipping, just in case anyone misheard that, right? Not used cars, but sports memorabilia. I would go to the local Walmart or gift shop and buy a pack and open them up 10 cards and try to sell one or two. eBay was coming up when I was young, so I would get envelopes and kind of try to sell those cards. That was very interesting to me. And then I never really, sought to start a company. This happened in my early 30s, and I'd experienced pain points in the given area that I'm working on. And so I don't know, like I don't know if it's nature and nurture. Um, I definitely think the only way to learn how to be an entrepreneur is just to jump in, right? Like I don't like I think everyone has some semblance of it. Like we wouldn't wake up every day if we didn't want to create or do things, right? We'd just stay home. Okay, we wouldn't go outside if like we inherently want to take risks, even at the audit level. So you just have to jump in and then you figure out if it's any fun or not.
How do you think about like risk on a personal level? So, like, do you think of entrepreneurship as this risky endeavor? Like, we talk about this, like taking the leap, or like, do you think about risk maybe a little bit differently?
Okay, so as a whole, absolutely, entrepreneurship is risky. Um, it should be considered a luxury in most scenarios. People that is like untalked about that the quote unquote founders right now have privileges and backdrops and backstops to be able to take risk, right? Um, so in almost all contexts, now there's people who've overcome this, from the depths of poverty. That's amazing. But almost in most contexts I've seen, it's a privilege. When it comes to risk, um, first of all, most entrepreneurs, like, and when I talk about entrepreneurs, I'm mostly talking about founders and probably technology founders. There's a lot of great entrepreneurs, but let's talk about those. Now, they probably think they're risk takers, but actually, there's been a foundation laid and a backstop and a backdrop for them to be able to take that risk. Just to be clear, there's still risk, but there's a prop up to take that risk. In terms of me, I'm actually not as much of a risk taker as your classic entrepreneur. A lot of entrepreneurs, I think, and I think founders wake up and they want to be a founder, right? Or maybe in college they want to be a founder. That's something they're aspiring to. That's something they work towards in their career. They're sitting at some tech company right now or at Deloitte or whatever, and in their heart they're like, oh, I want to be a founder. Okay, that wasn't me. Never for a minute did I want to be a founder, a CEO, a president, anything like that. When I was in my late 20s, I experienced pain, like white collar pain, right? Documents and spreadsheets. And so I felt like it was a problem. I felt like it was inefficient. I felt like it was unfair to pay money to audit something that I thought was ripe with fraud and frustration and burnout and stuff like that. So I just decided to fix it, but I got pulled into it. I had been in multiple jobs where I had experienced this thing, and I felt like it was critical that someone needed to do something about that. So there's a little bit of risk there, but like even with lease accounting and revenue recognition, I felt, look, people are out here looking for this anyway, right? So I'm not building something they didn't ask for. They're looking for a solution. They're doing it in spreadsheets. They're paying their consulting firm to help them. Like, I feel like this has a pretty good floor as a business, right? So that was kind of my risk appetite. I would think of it as like conservative within the spectrum of entrepreneurial risk.
Got you. Yeah, no, that's awesome. Isaac, keen to get your lens. Like, you've got a unique viewpoint here on like you're selling like basically the latest software
Yeah.
direct to potentially more like fast adopting CFO offices and audit firms. Is Trulion replacing what labor used to do? Is it giving labor more work, an opportunity? How do you think, like, will we have accountants in 10 years' time? What's your lens?
We will have accountants in 10-year time. We'll have a similar amount. Uh, they'll be more strategic and more judgmental and less paper pushers. Um, Look, we're actually not working with like early adopters in the way you think of it. Like I've worked with engineers before and salespeople and even like CIOs before who are much more early adopters in terms of working on the frontier of new technology. Surprisingly, like the people we work with, really, really test our solution hard. Like these aren't pilots, which is another weird nuance. These are companies that are testing their tests and their lease accounting and their revenue against our rules engine and making sure the outputs are the same, right? So it's a little bit after an early adopter cohort. Um, let's see, in terms of labor, yeah, I mean, we are not taking people's jobs right now. I think that job replacement will come incrementally in these industries. I think it will come through attrition and like upskilling or repurposing. So let's take audit, for example. And then right now we can already automate. So in terms of us replacing labor, AI, it does not replace labor right away. It doesn't even replace it directly. And I'm talking about white collar industries. It shifts it and it helps, usher in the shifting and repurposing of that labor. So let's take audit, for example. 50% of the COGS, the labor in the audit, a financial audit is substantive testing, right? The testing, the validation, the financial statements and everything. And of that 50%, 90% of it can be done with technology, right? Some mix of AI and technology. So that means that almost half the cost of the audit is going to get ripped out, so to speak. Um, that's going to take several years because it's going to start with the prepare role and it's going to kind of move up. And throughout that time, I think you're going to see attrition, right? And so that's going to lead to some labor. I think you're going to see what I would call like graduation, where the audit expert becomes the kind of technologist or center of excellence leader within the firm. And then you're going to see repurposing, where new business lines and new service lines are opened up with these firms, and those people will go over there. An example is like in testing right now, we have revenue reperformance and revenue existence and revenue cutoff templates, and that's great for substantive testing. But what our auditors have found is that you can take that and then go back to a company and help them find revenue leakage, right? A
Mm.
percentage, a basis point or two of leakage due to inefficient processes. So you can charge money for that. You can deliver value. And so I think that the kind of the methodologies of audit will create new avenues for like strategic thinking. I know it's a buzzword, but that's something that's actually
Yeah.
happened. And I think if you're like a customer success person, like true just customer support, you may be out of a job eventually for support agents. But with accountants and finance people, they have purview over the entire business. So whether you're internal or external, you literally have to understand the broader business. And I just assume in my heart that there's more places to insert yourself or kind of take some of the power of the business if you're sitting in a financial or accounting role, which is in charge of all the business, not just like a support area or sales area. That's my gut. Let's see.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, nice, nice. Isaac, little shift now. So you're a really great speaker. Like you're super clear at speaking. You're a really confident speaker, and or you did Toastmasters, which is like a public speaking qualification. Was that formative for you at all? Like, did you sign up to that as a reason? Was public speaking tricky for you in the past? Yeah, keen to hear.
I don't know. Um, I never considered myself like a great public speaker. Um, I get nervous when I do public speaking. Um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I remember I had an internship one time. I think it was my first internship, and I had to present as the intern to like a group of people. And the senior vice president, after I presented my intern project, and he pulled me aside after, and he said, "Where'd you learn how to do that?" And I said, "What?" He said, "Speak like that." And I said, I don't know, my bar mitzvah. And that was it. Like I had it when I was a kid. I had to give a speech in front of the congregation. Like I remember being nervous and like writing it out and printing it out and stuff. So I'm just saying, I don't know. Toastmasters was great. Like it's good, and I encourage people like to look at this as kind of as a that's definitely nurture. That's definitely something that everyone can work on if they have a bare minimum. Um, yeah, I think it was a little bit of nature, but a lot of work, and still very nervous every time I public speak.